Muy buenas noches a todos. Les saludo especialmente en nombre de la Asociación de Estudios Coreanos en Colombia. Agradezco mucho la participación de todas las personas que nos han escuchado a lo largo de estas ya 19 conferencias. Nos faltan 2 conferencias importantes y hemos querido a esta hora conectar con Seúl, Corea, para transmitir 2 conferencias importantes. Ahora, en esta sección, tendremos, gracias al auspicio de la Universidad Industrial de Santander, la conferencia ¿Por qué la inversión de las empresas coreanas en Colombia es lenta? Es una conferencia que dictará el profesor Jun Sae-yeon de Dankook University, y también tendremos al profesor Belges Park, profesor y consultor de la Universidad Autónoma de Bucaramanga durante mucho tiempo, Advisor of Global eBay Association Network de IAN, quien también estará acompañándonos con sus comentarios a propósito de esta conferencia. Y a las 8:30 de la noche se conectará la Universidad de Puyon National University con la profesora Ji Hyun Seo, doctora en estudios latinoamericanos de la Universidad de Liverpool. Bueno, para hablar del tema de cambio de importancia de la cooperación bilateral entre Corea y Colombia. Muy bien, debo decir que, por supuesto, es un gran honor poder transmitir a través de todos estos encuentros de amistad, sentir, digamos, esta amistad con Corea, y nos ha correspondido bajo la presidencia pro tempore de la asociación a la Universidad Libre organizar estos actos durante estos 2 años de trabajo que vienen ahora. La cooperación académica que ha tejido el señor embajador con las universidades colombianas, sin duda ha sido un vehículo transformador de las relaciones diplomáticas iniciadas hace ya 59 años de cooperación y amistad estratégica. Yo creo que en el siglo XXI elevar los valores del conocimiento de nuestros pueblos, apoyados en la educación, la cultura y el arte, contribuyen a potencializar los acuerdos más importantes en materia económica, comercial, industrial y tecnológica, que no pueden ser posibles sin la mejora en las capacidades de los individuos de ambos países. Es por ello que la asociación ha escogido este año el tema de cooperación Colombia-Corea del Sur en el marco de la Agenda de los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible, y hemos tenido varias conferencias, testimonios, paneles en los que hemos destacado la labor de la cooperación con Corea del Sur. Y, por supuesto, me corresponde presentar a los ponentes, a los panelistas de hoy, el profesor Jun Sae-yeon, a quien le damos un saludo, de la Universidad de Bangkok, graduado de la Escuela de Posgrado de la Universidad de Bangkok en grado doctorado, PhD, también graduado con un MBA de la Universidad Estatal del Sur de Oregon, graduado en la Universidad de Dankook con especialización en Administración de Empresas. Ha sido profesor de Comercio Internacional de la Universidad de Dankook, decano de su Facultad de Economía y Negocios, decano de Asuntos Estudiantiles, y esta posición pues lo ha llevado también a ser representante de varios comités de los ministerios de gobierno de Corea, presidente del Instituto de Investigación del Conocimiento Empresarial Global, de la Academia de Investigación Comercial de Corea, secretario general, asesor de cooperación, y con varios premios y distinciones, entre otros la Orden de Mérito del Servicio de Corea, por su contribución al comercio internacional de Corea. Bien, también quiero dar un saludo especial al profesor Bell Park, que está aquí con nosotros, a quien le pediría que por favor encienda su cámara. Quiero destacar también la labor tan importante que ha desempeñado el profesor Bell Park en Colombia. Profesor Bell Park estuvo vinculado muchos años con Colombia y actualmente lo está. Es doctor de Administración de Empresas Internacionales, MBA de Negocios Internacionales, de la Escuela de Economía y Administración de Empresas de Helsinki, en Finlandia, con un MCM, una maestría de Ciencias de Gestión Internacional, del Little Management Education Institute en Boston. Y en su carrera profesional, digamos, es actualmente asesor de la red de la Asociación Mundial de Vehículos Eléctricos y de la Exposición Internacional de Vehículos Eléctricos, profesor de la Universidad en la Escuela de Negocios Internacionales de la Autónoma de Bucaramanga, asesor de internacionalización de COICA World Frames en la Alcaldía de Bucaramanga, profesor de Negocios Internacionales de la Universidad de G, y en su larga trayectoria pues ha tenido la posibilidad de asesorar y trabajar en diferentes proyectos de la cooperación internacional con Corea. Bien, pues debo decir, sin más, debo darles la palabra a nuestros queridos invitados. Entonces, tiene usted la palabra, profesor Jeon.
Okay. I'll start my presentation. And actually, I just visited once to Bogota and Bucaramanga, invited by the UNAP University, which was the Belbag was working for. And I was very impressed with the beautiful sceneries and good weathers, and everything was very good compared with that of Korea. Actually, I'm not the expertise in international, the foreign direct investment of Colombia, but I was with KOTRA, Korea Trade and Investment Agency, and KITA, Korea International Trade Association, for 23 years. And last time, in 2019 and 2018, twice we had capacity building workshop for Bucaramanga and Santander, the government officials and the business people, and some the dean of the president of UNAP, and yeah, we had lots of every time we have 15 guests from Colombia, and we had a good time and shared information and knowledge to make Colombia the internationalize in terms of business. So it's that's all my experience with Colombia. However, this time Belbag strongly recommended me to make a presentation on the Colombia's FDI environment. So it's based on my knowledge and my work experience. So please understand that I do not cover lots of part to the Colombian environment. I'm going to talk about the Korean history and how Korea succeeds in attracting the FDI from foreign countries, and how we transformed our economic, the industrial structure, and the international trade was very important. So I'm going to share my presentation.
Gracias, profesor.
Mm-hmm. Is it fast or is it okay, Sandra? Oh, yeah. You cannot share. You cannot see yet. Okay.
No.
No,
Aún
no. Ya,
ya,
ahora sí.
ya está cargando.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we are going to talk about FDI, foreign direct investment, and just a minute. Oops. Okay. Basically, I'm going to talk about Korea's economic development process, and international trade was very important. And during this period, we succeed attracting FDI also. So I'm gonna give some ideas and how Korea will succeed in trade and FDI. So the contents will cover the Korea's economic development and the Korea economy and trade. And during the development, the role of top leadership was very important in Korea. And the major numbers of Korea's FDI statistics and Korea's business environment. And I'll talk about Colombia FDI and the Colombia FDI SWOT analysis and strategy, followed by FDI related self-questions with not only the Colombia, but also Korea and any countries who want to attract FDI should think about this. It's my opinion. And lastly, I covered Invest Korea, Korea's Korean FDI supporting organization. And it will take, I'm going to use about 30 to 35 minutes so that we can have some discussion. Many people talk about the Korean miracle because we started from the nothing, issue of the Korean War. Korean War was very brutal, and it took 3 years, and our people, the war killed 2 million Korean people, and I appreciate especially Colombia because you sent the military to save our freedom at the time. And Korea's government is export-oriented industrialization strategy plus attracting FDI successfully. It was the key of Korea's the economic development miracle. And Korean people are well educated, and we have passion to learn and live better. So well educated and well disciplined workforce is also the major factor of our success. Strong government could do some policies, strong policies, science and technology, R&D innovation. It was one of the major success factors. As you may know, probably the presenter already covered. 35 years, Korea was colonized by Japan, and we liberalized 1945, and but we didn't have anything. But unfortunately, territory divided by two. South Korea and North Korea, and North Korea became communist country, and now it's a kind of a headache in the world nowadays also. And the Korean government established 1948, and the Korean War broke 1950, and it lasted 3 years, and it's most brutal the war in the world, and we fought each other we are brothers and sisters, and we fought each other. It's a shame, and it's a very heartbreak, the history of Korea. When we start our economic development, President Lee Seung-man, his major policy was import substitution in some industries, but it was not so successful. And President Park Chung-hee, he ruled Korea for 18 years. He get the power by the coup d'etat. He was the military leader, but his economic development plan was very right on the track, and his strategy was export-driven policies, and it is just brief history of Korea's the orientation of economic development. And international trade was just the growth engine for Korean economy, and we didn't have any lack of natural resources. When I visit Colombia, you have very abundant natural resources and fruits and everything. But in Korea, we do not have any gas and oil, and so we should buy from other countries. But to buy that kind of resource, we need a foreign exchange money. So we should sell out something. So we changed our strategy to export-oriented policy, and so technology imports raw materials and make some product and export. And through the trade, we created jobs, and we changed in the industrial structure and advanced technology and infrastructure like ports and highways and etc. Korea's the trade dependency is one of the highest country in the world, and nowadays it's around 80%. That means Korea depends on the global market and world market. If we do not import and export, we cannot survive in these days. Korea's record is very marvelous. In 1964, our export was 100 million US dollar, and 2011 we go into the 1 trillion club, trade club. It was ninth nation in the world, and our export volume was more than 500 billion US dollar. It took 47 years, and our exports increased 5,000 times. It is probably world history record. If you take a look at I'm going to give some idea of what happened to Korea. And in 1961, Korea exported this kind of products: iron ore, tungsten, raw yarns, and cuttlefish, live fish, graphite, rice, swine breast. Swine breast is pig's hair to make the probably eyebrows, something like that. And this is the 10 major export items, 2019. And semiconductors, vessel, automobile, petroleum products, something like that. But the automobile parts and automobile and mobile computer, something. And I take a look at the Colombia's trade volume. It is similar to the 1986 to 1988 of Korea, similar in terms of trade volume. So I take a look at what happened during these days, what Korea did do. As I said, Korea's trade volume was over $1 trillion US dollar in 2011, and yeah. So this is the graphics. Yeah, we are we started from the export 100 million dollar export, and Korea's strategy was focused in the government was very strong. So, and we set the goal like the fabric, silk, cotton, something like that. This textile industry and the government support the industry very strongly and set up the infrastructure so that the companies can work for that. And as you see, as time follows, our focus changes: radio, TV set, and semiconductor, ICT infra, and the cellular phones, LCD, and petroleum, and yeah, from light things in manufacturing to move to the heavy industry, and like Hyundai heavy industry, POSCO, we've set up the early 1970s, and I checked here because in this stage, the international trade volume is similar to that of the Colombia nowadays, 2020 or 2019. So what happened? We invested in semiconductors in 1983, and the ICT infra was set up around here. So to give some idea, focused, because we are lack of resources, so we should focus and in some industry, not everything. It's based on our economy and our capacity. It's very important. Korea was most devastated country in 1950s, and we have Korean War and living its residence area, and it was the rural area. It's Seoul. It was Seoul, and we are very poor country, but we changed it. It took 50 to 60 years, and Korea changed hugely. And when I talk about Korean economic development with foreign the friends, and I had participated more than 10 times of KOICA project to communicate on the Korean economic development. At the time, I already talk about the leadership of the top leadership of the president. This is President Park Chung-hee, and he has export promotion meeting, and with all the economy related the ministers and the business people and banks, so that and no, if they have any difficulties and inconvenience, he ordered and resolved everything in one shot. Right? And he was very patriotic, even though he got the power by the coup d'etat. He had export day, and he always come to the ceremony and directly give the prize. It was very strong. At the time, economic planning, the board or this is economic planning part of the government. It was very strong because they reported directly to the president, and the president supported him at this part. And yeah, so every budget and economic planning was a bit very organized, and because we are lack of resources, and so very focused effort was very effective. This is Korea's key economic indicators. Trade volume is 7th or 8th in the world. Korea, as you see, Korea is a very small country. 1/12 of the Colombian territory, very small country, but our trade volume is 7th to 8th in the world, and the trade balance 5th, and our foreign reserve is more than 450 billion US dollar we have. And our GDP is 10 to 12 in the world, and number of listed company 8, and the foreign exchange reserve it increased, and it's 9th in the world, and the national brand value is 9th. And Korea became the very strong economic countries, and this is just a minute. What it got FDI statistics from outside the foreign companies invested in Korea. It's the numbers, and you can just you'll get the presentation file, and you can take a look at with the time. And this is the source of investors for the FDI to Korea. And for the more than 5 years, we kept the foreign investment in Korea. This is Korea's FDI. The FDI companies has about 20% export of the total Korea's export, and sales 12%. R&D is 5.7%, and the employment also 5.5%. That means for Korea, FDI the foreign investment company is very important for Korea also. Then Korea economic contribution of foreign invested companies. GDP share of manufacturing. Actually, Korea is very strong in manufacturing. China is 28.8%. Korea is the second, 27.5%, and followed by Japan and Germany, Spain, USA, France, Canada. Global market share of Korea's key industry is OLED display is 90% Korean. It's number one, and television sets 51%. Fresh memories and the electronic vehicle batteries, DRM, shipbuilding is number one, 37% of the world market. We have 14 Korean companies in the global Fortune 500, and with the Korea's economy, the growth, the Korean companies grow very fast. The Korea's innovation index is first in Asia, and value-added manufacturing is third, and R&D intensity is second, high-tech intensity and research concentration is first and fifth. Korea, as I said, Korea has very well-educated, disciplined the workforces, and nowadays more than 70 to 80% of the people go to college, and it's the highest in OECD. I think it's too high because some people who don't need the diploma from the college still go to college, because in Korea, if the young people do not graduate college, they cannot, they feel they are loser. So our minimum age is very high compared with our economic level also. It's the monthly $1,284 US. It's more than US, United States, America, and Australia, Germany. It's the increase too rapidly. It's kind of burdensome. So foreign companies also will reluctant to come to Korea because of them. Even though we have good human resources, but too expensive. We have Korea is a FTA hub country. We have 15 to 16 FTA, and 56 countries connected with Korea with the FTA, and whole world markets. 77% of world GDP is connected to the FTA to Korea, and here Colombia and Peru, Chile. Chile was our first partner of the FTA. We got the EU, India, China, United States of America, and ASEAN, and other countries also. Our rental price is not so high compared with the rich countries like Japan, Austria, Singapore. It's reasonable. We have good infrastructures. We have Incheon International Airport at the third in the world, and Busan Port is the second. and Incheon International Airport is first in terms of cargo traffic, because our cargo traffic is very, we have lots of cargo traffic because we have Samsung and the LG, this kind of companies, electronic companies, the export product by air cargo for the mobile phones and the display and something like that. Busan Port. We have liner shipping connectivity index is third in the world, and we have the geographical position is not so good because it's North East Asian country, but we have good connectivity with shipping and air cargo, something like that. Korea, I was with Kochra and worked for the FDI, attracting FDI to Korea through the resolving their difficulties and inconvenience. The already invested company that I visited and hear their complaints and resolve in a week. And so we can attract more investment from already the invested company also. And we have tax reduction, corporate income tax, 100% exempt for 5 years and 50% for another 2 years. And acquisition tax, 100% reduction, exemption. Property tax, and we have lots of incentives to the cash grant and the location support. We make the industrial complex for the foreign invested companies, and we supply everything, water, electricity, and land, and we pave the road and make them easy to locate, and we have the supporting system, one-stop service from Invest Korea. Later on, I'm gonna explain a little about that. I'm going to talk about FDI in Colombia. It's the statistics I got. It's inbound and outbound, and this is the inbound to Colombia. And this is US $1 million. So not so bad, and it's the trend is increasing rapidly. That means Colombia is opening its market and helping the foreign invested companies. Korea's FDI in Colombia, we have 6-year statistics, and so far it's not so much, but before FTA and after FTA, before FTA, telecommunication of information was the major, but after FTA, wholesale or retail invested to Colombia. I made this to compare the Colombia's Korean investment into Colombia and other countries like Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, and Chile. Compared with other countries, Korea's investment into Colombia is very low, and it's a new investment, and we have 4 cases, and it's a volume of the $1 million, $4 million for Chile, $69 million for 2020. And Brazil, we are investing $272 million. And for the Mexico, $284 million. For the Mexico, because of NAFTA of the United States and Canada and Mexico, and Korean companies, especially automobile and or the cellular phone companies, come to here and made some manufacturing there. And that's why it's a big number. And the Korean companies, manufacturing companies, is invested in Brazil also. Brazil is a big market, and Argentina and Chile. Probably Colombia also have a good market, and probably it will soon grow bigger than Argentina, I think. This is the list I made, and based on my experience working for attracting the FDI from foreign countries, we should think about this. It's my opinion. Do our government offer one-stop service for FDI investors setting up business? Because I do not have much knowledge on the Colombia's FDI policies and the status, and so I'm asking myself and yourself on this government of one-stop service for FDI investors setting up business, and do we have a size of domestic market? I understand Colombia has a big market, more than 50 million the population, and in terms of income level is not bad, more than $5,000 the per capita and population. Are there enough workforces who are well educated and disciplined? And I understand Colombia, the young people are eager to learn and disciplined. And what's the level of domestic and international logistics of my country, like seaport, airport, road, highways, and railways? I just glanced at the Colombia, visiting just once, and I take a look at Andes mountains and huge mountains, and because of that, the highways and railways, it is very difficult to move around, even though we have infrastructure, but probably we needed to upgrade this part. Residents, employees, living conditions are good enough. Safety, we should feel safe, and if the employees come to and move to Colombia and live there, we should offer the education facilities like the schools and international schools, and transportation. Weather is good, food is good, culture also fantastic. Do government grant FDI company tax incentives? And I explained about Korean incentives for the inbound FDI, the foreign companies, and I do not know exactly what kind of the tax incentives and cash the government offers. Is our economic growth faster than other countries? And I understand the Colombia economy is growing and moving forward very fast. are there red tapes or corruption in our central or local government in working with companies? Not only the foreign invested company, but also for the local company should feel they are safe, and government and the officials are going to help me to succeed instead of they regulate and constrain me. Actually, unfortunately, in Korea these days, the government's sight on the business is very negative, and so it's not good for Korea. Probably the government is going to change. How's the wage level of workers in our country, competitive or not? For Korea, the wage level is too high. It's most highest in the world. And how about Colombia? Do we have a friendly atmosphere to local and foreign companies? I already talked about this. Do we have an organization which in charge of inbound and outbound FDI? And we have KOTRA, Korea Trade and Investment Agency. As government invested the organization, they are helping the FDI related one-stop service. It's named Invest Korea. And not only the inbound FDI, outbound FDI, we have the help. Do our leader fully understand the importance of FDI and support? Last time, I understand the president of Colombia visited a state visit to Korea, and he has lots of interest in attracting FDI from Korea also. Do we have a good export supporting system for goods made in Colombia? Even though we invest and make some product, we should have infrastructure to easing and supporting system for the export. Do we have a direct channel to resolve any difficulties and complaints of foreign companies operating in Colombia? In Korea, we have ombudsman, foreign invested ombudsman office we have in KOTRA, and if the foreign companies, the invested companies are operating in Korea, if they have complaint and difficulties, with the ombudsman office, register the problem to the related government, the agency, and they should resolve within 1 week. Even though they cannot resolve everything, they should send what they are doing and what's going on and how they are going to resolve the problem. And this is the reasons for the why the Korean companies slow in investment in Colombia. And actually, we have some the image of corruption and insufficient infrastructure and poor road and transportation system. So we have the SWOT analysis, but it's just you can take a look at, because and I'm not sure 100% sure about this opinion, but based on my experience, I made a shot, and you can take a look at later. And Korea has the organization who help the FDI companies inbound and outbound invest Korea, and we have 51 offices in the other countries also, and we are having lots of activities, Invest Korea Week, and for the job opportunities for the invested companies and the marketplace. And we are helping. We have Global Alliance Project Series, and so that's it. It took more than I expected. Anyway, that's all of my presentation. Thank you very much for your hearing. Okay, if you have any questions, and probably the professor.
Okay, Mr. Jeon. Thank you, Professor, for your participation and your presentation.
Thank you.
Several concerns are still regarding policy design versus sustainable development goals. You have inquired for questions regarding foreign direct investment. Professor Young, you have proof that growth is slow in Colombia. Do you believe this is due to monopoly positions on the part of the government in some sectors of the government? Or do you think it is an inadequate negotiation of the treaty? Or believe that the investment provisions in the treaty are not favorable?
You mean when we attract FDI, you mean are you talking about that situation?
Yes, Professor. I think that we have a troubles with the investment provisions in the treaty. Or I think that is inadequate or monopoly positions on the part of the government in some sectors of the government. For example, energy.
Yeah, actually, probably every country has a priority for the investment or development, and based on the needs and the demand, sometimes we should get the investment, attract investment from foreign countries, and it depends on. But for the in Korea, when the regarding the risk of the industrial sector, the Department of Commerce, Department of Industry and Commerce, the controlled whole and the Presidency Office directly controlled through the Department of Industry and Commerce. So in the government organization in Korea, it was Ministry of the Industry and Commerce, but we set up the government-owned company named Kochra. Their first mission was developing foreign market, but they added one, helping the attracting FDI and outbound FDI. So probably in Colombia, we need the resources from we need abundant resources from the other countries, and because companies has technology and money, and they should invest into Colombia and make business. In that case, probably government should set up that kind of one-stop service. If they apply, they have interest in investing in Colombia, and the government officials and the service people should help them get rid of all the red tapes. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Professor John Se-Young.
Thank you.
I'm the Director of International Relations at UIS. First of all, I want to thank for your interesting points that you are presenting us in this important area of international development and foreign direct investment.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to ask you one question that people is basically interested in. One of the main ideas that you presented today was this fast development based on a specific strategy
Mm-hmm.
that focus Korean direct investment into the electronics and technology
Mm-hmm.
industry.
Mm-hmm.
That means that in order to have that, you mentioned that you need a well-educated labor force. In order to have that, obviously, you need a strong engineering schools at universities.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that that lesson from Korea can be at some point replied in Colombia, and is a good idea to say that we could also have a strategy focused on this area of innovation, development, and based on like this area of technology and stuff.
Okay.
Do you see Colombia following these steps, or you think that we have a better opportunity in other areas?
Yeah, actually, in Korea, we have two tracks. One is the developing we are investing lots of money from government to the company for the R&D, the project. If they have some good ideas and good technology, they are going to develop, and the government support financially based on their proposal. Every year, it's huge money because private companies would. It's hard to take a risk because we cannot sure we'll succeed or not. So government support financially for the R&D project. One about your question, and if we have the different strategy for the different focus on the industry, light industry, and we would move to the heavy industry, move to the ICT industry, something like that. So government announced the blueprint, 5-year economic development plan, and we announced to the business and people that we are going this side, and if it's a big chance for the companies, because if they, even though they do not have the technology or people, if they try to invest, the government help the borrow some fund and support R&D. So the companies is growing, and the government cannot directly do that kind of activity. So if you take a look at the graphics I presented, and it's by 10 years, 5 years, our focus is changed, and the government was very strong. So when I talk with underdeveloped countries like the Asian countries or the African countries, I always emphasized the importance of the top leadership, because they should have a real dictatorship. It's not welcomed, but kind of necessary. For to go directly to the target instead we talking each other and get consensus. We are losing time and resources. So it depends on the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Mario, your microphone is silent, so please turn it on. Mario.
Perdón, profesor León. Te decía que ha llegado la hora de casi finalizar la conferencia. Voy a darle paso al profesor Park, quien quiere hacer unos comentarios, pero antes darle un saludo especial a la profesora Ji-Hyun Seo, que ya se ha conectado de la Universidad de Puyón y quien tiene a cargo la siguiente conferencia. Decirle a la profesora Hyun Seo que tardaremos un poco más de 10 minutos, menos de 10 minutos, con nuestro profesor Park para no perder la oportunidad de estar con él. Profesor Park, bienvenido entonces a la Universidad Libre y a la Asociación de Estudios Coreanos y agradecerle su participación. Adelante, profesor.
Welcome, Mr. Park.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Nice to meet you. And then in particular, the Professor Carlos Vecino and then Mario Lopez. And then we communicate a lot, but it's the first time to see you. Because of the time is a little behind of the schedule. And then I'll try to finish within 10 minutes because the next speaker is waiting for the presentation. So I will move very quickly. And then I will give some keywords for you to understand about my presentation. And then last 2 days, and then the Director Chang Bong-sun and then Professor Yoon Se-jung had a very nice presentation. So I hope those two presentations might be very helpful for all the scholars to understand the Korean strategy. Ladies and gentlemen, and then as the professors, I'm very happy to share my experience. I don't want to go to the theory. I want to share my experience, 5 years experience in Colombia. The first one I would like to talk about the foreign language, and then why Colombia is not much interested in learning foreign language. Probably is the many Spanish, as the Colombian thinks that the Spanish is enough. We have one single market, Latin America. No need to speak in English. Without English, we can make a very good business. We can have a very good friendship and everything. And then also in the United States, and then Spanish is one of the 5 foreign language. So you can communicate with any other as the countries in the international organizations. And another issue is that why Korean companies do not invest so much to the Colombia. And then is I think the Colombia investment is much attractiveness compared to the Brazil and Mexico and then Chile and Argentina. According to my experience, and then in Colombia, when I was in Santander, around 10% of the professors can speak English. WIS is different. WIS is more than 60%. But the other, the universities, when I taught them, and then around 10% of professors can speak English. That means most of the people cannot speak English very well. So but then in case of the Carlos Vecino and the Mario Lopez, the English is much, much better than I, because if the Colombian will have some interest to learn English, and his ability to speak English is much better than Korean and than I. I don't know why they do not spend the time to learn the English. Why Korean is so much passionate about the foreign language? There's two words, to survive, because we don't have natural resources, we have only people, and then we don't have any money and foreign capitals. So, to survive in my countries, we should learn English to have a business with foreign countries. And then the Korean was the poorest country in 1960, one of the the poorest country at the time is the poorer than North Korea. Now, Professor Chung mentioned that 12th largest economic country, but according to last year data, and Korea is the 8th largest the country. So many Korean people has the willingness to live well like the other countries. In 1950, 1960, as Colombia was much richer than Korea, but now it's a little bit, Korean is richer than the Colombia. What are the means to promote English education in Korea? That is, in Korea, there's two motives for all the people to study English. One is that in order to go to the high school, middle school, and the university, they should pass the entrance exam. When I was in Colombia, Santander, I exclude the VII and all the university, though they don't have any entrance exam. But in Korea, a strong competitiveness to go to the middle school, high school, and then the primary, the best universities. And the second one is that, to get a job in the company, and then the English is a required exam. So if they cannot speak English, and they cannot good job in my country. So in Korea, these two motives to get a job, to go to university, to go to middle school, the English is required.
Mm-hmm.
How to teach English in Korea? Yesterday, the Director Chang mentioned about the more in detail, but it's a compulsory education. So English is a compulsory and essential education. And then is in order to survive, and then is in the fierce competition, English is very important issues. And the policy proposal for foreign language education in Colombia, and then is I think the benchmarking the English education policies of 3 Northeastern Asian countries. Korean English education system come from Japan. Now China as the benchmarking of the Korean as the English education system. So every different countries have different cultures, but the cordially suggests that the Ministry of Education learn about the Korean English education system. It will be very good. The chances, opportunities for the Colombian government to teach the English more essentially. And then Professor Chung mentioned about the ranking of the Korean companies to invest in Latin America. It's in Mexico the first, the second Brazil, and Chile, and Argentina. I'm not sure, but it depends on the level of English. I think Mexico and then the Brazil, Chile, Argentina, Colombia is that about the ranking of the fluency of the English. I'm not sure, but I think you think about this issue. And then I want to go to some issues for attracting investment from Korean companies in Colombia. And then you have some weakness of the transportation infrastructure. When I was in Santander, when we export some goods from Santander to Korea, and then is the land transportation cost is bigger than the seaport transportation. That means from Santander to the airport, the logistic cost is much higher than from your port to the Korean Busan port. That means the very serious of the inland transportation, labor productivity, and then is the Colombian people as the prefers happiness than the money. But the Korean is a little bit different. Korean, in order to be rich, and then Korea more concerned about the money than the happiness. So, but it's your labor productivity is a little bit less than Korean. And then Professor Chung mentioned about red tapes. And then I hate the too much rotary in Colombia. When as I go to some as the immigration or whatever, I should get more than 5 times the of rotary. And I don't know why you have this kind of system. And the rotary in my country in the past we have lots of rotaries, but there's no more rotary. And we go directly to the government office or whatever. So remove all the rotaries in Colombia, and then it will be a very efficient way to attract Korean investment to your country. And then I have same opinion with Professor Chung. Domestic market size is small. So how to integrate, and then as the Great Colombia, and like in the past, if you make a good one single market, and then as this, it will be very good for Korean companies to invest a lot. And then as the corruption is already you know very well, as the many cases, and then corruption is another issues to remove. And then areas that Korean companies may be interested in. This one is that from the Carlos Vecino is the more concerned about technology, but technology is another issue. And then is I will not go to technology issue, but the first one is the tunnel. In order to reduce the land costs of the transportation, you need tunnel. You have the Andes Mountains is a kind of the bottleneck to reduce the logistic cost. Korea is 70% of land is also mountain. So Korea is a mountainous country like Colombia, but we made a lot of tunnels. Our technology to make tunnels is the best in the world. So if you make the tunnels in Colombia with the Korean investment and the Korean technology, and then you learn how to make tunnels, and then you can use that knowledge to export how to use the tunnel in other African, Latin American countries. So my strong suggestion is that induce the investment tunnel. And the second one is that the railroad. That is another issue. In Korea, the railroad is very, very strong. The tools to reduce logistic costs, and then the ports. Another issue is that the coffee, cacao, and then agricultural processing products is very important. We have a very good natural resources, in particular agriculture, but you do export only natural resources in order to make the high value added, and you should induce foreign capitals to make the best quality of the products to export other countries. Korea no natural resources. We import natural resources and then to process it and to export to other countries. But you have the good abundant of natural resources. So if you invest foreign companies to make it to export, that is very important. And also the medicine, and then you have a lot of the agricultural products to make the medicine. We cannot find in Korea. This one is the very good resources to induce the drug companies from Korea. Another one is that the hydrogen power the station, and also new and renewable energy, and then in particular the solar energy. And then Korean is very strong in new and renewable energy. If you induce a Korean investment on new and renewable energy, it will be a good chance to develop your economy. Finally, what is the strategy to attract the Korean companies' investment to your country? The first one is that you should know that what kind of areas Korean companies are interested in to invest in Colombia. If you do not know the Korean companies' interest, you cannot induce and then attract Korean companies. But you do not have this kind of studies. And then the second one is to understand the Korean corporate culture. And then in order to make a good negotiation without understanding of Korean cultures, and you cannot be succeeding to attract Korean investment to countries. The third one is that EDCF, Economic Development Cooperation Fund, is that 20 years and then a loan, no interest rate, low interest, almost zero interest rate. Why do not use this kind of the fund? This is very important. And then if you use this fund, and then you can more easily to attract Korean investment to your country. Lastly, the summit. I made an article to Vanguardia in Santander under the Ivan Duque and they visited Korea, but no result. He came to Korea, but he returned with empty bag. And then when he came, he should meet the Korean as the conglomerate countries and to bring the bag with a lot of investment. But his bag is empty. He stayed here 1 week. Why is he is returned to Colombia with empty as the bag? That is another issue. And finally, I think these two issues, foreign languages and then inducement foreign investment, is very important because these two issues is the key essential issues for Korean economy has developed last 50 years. And then already I mentioned that in 1960s, Korea is one of the poorest in country like Africa. But last year we became the 8th largest countries in the world. What is the secrecy of the Korean economy? The first one, there are many, but among them, two issues is very important. Foreign language, learn English. Probably now in Korea, and then learning Chinese. The most middle school and high school teach Chinese. Why? The first market is moving from US to China. So in order to increase our market share in China, we should learn Chinese. And the second one is that attract foreign investment. This one is not easy issue. So you should know every country's concern, not only Korea. You should do research. What is the interesting area by Japanese companies, by Korean companies, by Chinese companies? These three countries have different cultures and different concern because the economic level is different. Chinese is a little bit lower than Korea. And then as Japan is much higher than Korea in terms of technology. So if you have the same policy to attract foreign investment among three countries, you might be very failed. So according to the old saying in China, in order to survive, in order to succeed, know thyself. Know yourself first. What is the current situation of Colombia? And secondly, know your enemy or your partners. And even though you know yourself very well, if you do not know about Korea, China, and then Japan, and then it's not easy to attract many the foreign the investment from those three countries' companies. Well, I tried to finish 10 minutes, and then Maria Lopez, and I'm very sorry, and it's almost 15 minutes, and then it's very difficult to manage the time, and then I think that I'm very sorry to the next speakers So if you have any questions, send the message and I will answer to you. Because of time constraints, I cannot receive any questions. Or anybody has some interest,
Thank you very
send the
much.
email to the Mario Lopez and I will answer them. Okay, thank you very much. And then thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Bell. You have supported these efforts by Colombia and the associations. We believe that your support should be maintained in the future so that we can link several of our wishes. We want you to learn Spanish too. We know that we have a lot to improve on the language policy, and we will learn from the Korean system. The lectures here today are very important, and we will do our best to convey these ideas from Mr. Jeon's presentations to the government leaders on these issues. Thank you very much, Professor Bell, Professor Jeon, for your presentations, and Professor Carlos Vecino from Universidad Industrial de Santander por acompañar este.
Thank you, Carlos Vecinos and Mario Lopez. And
Gracias.
Then, Dr. Jong. Thank
Carlos
you.
and Mario.
Agradecemos también a la profesora Hee Hyun Seo y le damos la bienvenida pidiéndole disculpas por llegar tarde a su presentación y le damos un saludo cordial. Sabemos que la profesora Hyun Seo habla castellano y podríamos no requerir el proceso de traducción simultánea. Entonces, agradecemos mucho al servicio de traducción que nos ha acompañado el día de hoy. Y vamos a dar inicio a la presentación de la profesora Hee Hyun Seo. La profesora Hee Hyun Seo viene gracias al apoyo y participación de la Universidad de Pukyong University. Ella es doctora del Instituto de Estudios de la Universidad Nacional de Pukyong. Recibió su doctorado en estudios latinoamericanos en la Universidad de Liverpool, Reino Unido. Es miembro de la Asociación de Estudios Latinoamericanos de Corea, la SAC, y de la Red de Estudios Latinoamericanos de Asia Oriental. Miembro del Consejo Editorial de la revista Asian of Latin American Studies. Su campo de investigación incluye estudios de desarrollo, ecología política, estudios urbanos, geografía del desarrollo y sociología ambiental, enfocándose principalmente en casos de América Latina. Ha publicado, presentado varios libros, capítulos de libros en estos campos. Su investigación es el tema de la ecologización de la cooperación internacional entre Asia y América Latina, por lo que es muy grato para nosotros, profesora, para la Universidad Libre y para la Asociación de Estudios Coreanos, aprovechar nuestro convenio para tenerla entre nosotros.
Muchas gracias por su cordial introducción y muy buenas noches allá en Colombia y muy buenos días acá en Corea. Soy profesora Ji Han-seo de la División de Estudios Internacionales y Áreas de la Universidad Nacional de Pukyong, Corea del Sur. Agradezco mucho por su invitación y me alegro mucho de darles hoy esta presentación titulada Cambio de la importancia de la cooperación bilateral entre Corea y Colombia. Bueno, durante mi vida académica he investigado sobre los temas relacionados a los asuntos latinoamericanos en mayor parte, pero por esta conferencia me he dado una oportunidad de ver los asuntos especialmente de la relación bilateral entre Corea y Colombia. Como este tema no es mi principal punto de investigación, la presentación no será muy larga, aproximadamente por 30 minutos, pero espero que esta presentación nos dé una señal de cambio de opiniones. Bueno, ahora voy a darles la presentación preparada en inglés y espero que sea informativa para ustedes. ¿Ve la pantalla?
Sí, señora.
Sí, gracias.
La vemos. Muchas gracias.
Bueno, here's the list of contents. First of all, I'll give you general information on Korea and Colombia relationship. And then I'll explain changing importance and characteristics of bilateral relationship according to separate 4 periods. First, before mid-1950s. Second, between mid-1950s and mid-1970s. Third, between mid-1970s and mid-2000s. And finally, after mid-2000s. So here's the general information on Korea and Colombia relationship. As you can see on the left-hand side, you can see some of the information on Korea. And on the right-hand side, you can see some of the information on Colombia. Right. Well, Korea is a unitary presidential constitutional republic like Colombia, and its total GDP in 2021 is $1,806 trillion. And well, this is the map of South Korea. It's bordering with North Korea, and the Seoul is located in the northern side, and my university is located in the southern, down south in Busan. Official language is Korean. 2 countries formed a formal diplomatic relationship in March 1962. Korea established its embassy in Colombia in 1971, while Colombia established it in 1978. 2 countries signed a bilateral free trade agreement in February 2013, and it took effect in July 2016. Korea exports mainly car and its related components and machinery, etc., to Colombia, reaching $5.98 billion in 2020. And Colombia exports mainly natural resources such as petroleum, gold, iron, coffee, etc., to Korea, totaling $6.93 billion. I divided 4 main periods of bilateral relationship according to different characteristics and focus. So I'll give you explanations of main characteristics of bilateral relationship each period. Well, first period is before the mid-1950s. First, you can see Korean government's approach to Colombia and Latin America in general. When some of Latin American countries, such as Cuba, Brazil, Chile, etc., approved the sovereignty of Republic Korea in 1948 UN resolution, Korea recognized the Latin American region as friendly countries. When the Korean War occurred in 1950, Colombia has decided to send the military support, and this was the initial relationship between 2 countries. Second, you can see Colombian government's basic diplomatic policy. In the post-war era, the Colombian government highlighted the importance of the role of international organizations, such as the United Nations in the promotion of international order and peace. And it took an active role in the establishment of the United Nations and became the first member country of the UN Economic and Social Council in Latin America in 1945. The country participated in other UN sub-organizations such as UNCTAD, UNDP, ECLA, IMF, RBRD, ILO as a member country. Particularly regarding international issues outside the Americas, it emphasized the role and function of the United Nations, that is the role of UN General Assembly and UN Security Council, etc. In terms of international politics, Colombia tried to strengthen collaboration system rather than to take an independent approach. In particular, the country preferred to recognize the leading role of the United States and attempted to solve problems of the Americas via the US-led Organization of American States. Now I'll explain briefly why Colombia decided to participate in Korean War. You can think of two aspects. One is diplomatic relationship and another is national politics. First, let's see the diplomatic relationship. Against the backdrop of Cold War, the US highlighted the importance of collective security system. While Latin American countries supported the US-led collective security system via OAS and military cooperation, the US promised economic and social assistance for the modernization of Latin American countries. Colombia was not an exception in this regard. And the second, let's see the national politics. There was a deepening of socio-political crisis after the 1946 presidential elections and the spread of guerrilla movements. In response to subversive forces inside the country, the government strengthened the power and capacity of military and police and aimed to modernize the military system. The decision of participation in Korean War was based on this diplomatic and national political background. Against the socio-political crisis within Colombia, then Colombian conservative regime attempted to modernize the country's military system by professionalizing the military and improving military equipment. At the same time, the regime aimed to strengthen bilateral relationship with the US and thus to receive socioeconomic and technical aid from the US. So these were the bilateral relationship before mid-1950s. Now, let's talk about bilateral relationship between mid-1950s and mid-1970s. During this time, you can figure out changing diplomatic position of two countries. First, let's talk about the changing diplomatic position of Korea. There was a change in diplomatic focus in the post-Korean War period. First, political and diplomatic goal. One of main diplomatic goals of Korea is to take a diplomatic precedence over North Korea in the international politics. This led to country's emphasis on the importance of diplomatic and security relationship. In this regard, the country tried to expand diplomatic relationship to non-aligned countries rather than to focus on the relationship only with the United States. And the second one is the economic goal. The country attempted to secure resource and to expand the export market around the globe in an attempt to promote economic growth. In this regard, the country established diplomatic relationship with more than 20 Latin American countries in the 1960s. Second, let's talk about the changing diplomatic position of Colombia. First, political and diplomatic relationship. Colombia maintained its traditional friendly relationship with the United States regarding international politics. But with the rise of non-aligned group and of the importance of post-colonial countries in the mid-20th century, the country sided with neighboring Latin American countries regarding ethnic and colonial issues. Second, promotion of economic growth. Since the 1960s, Colombia strengthened its relationship with regional organizations such as Latin America Free Trade Association or Andean Common Market, etc. One of the Colombia's main goals for diplomacy in the 1960s and 70s included economic growth. This was promoted by the US-led Alliance for Progress programs. So in the 1960s and 70s, the bilateral relationship was formally established. Two countries maintained friendly relationship with the United States during the Cold War era, where they promoted economic growth by increasing regional trade or expanding aid and export markets. Now let's talk about the third period between mid-1970s and mid-2000s. Main characteristics of bilateral relations in the 1970s is to promote more direct relations between two countries rather than focusing on US-led or a related relationship. This is due to the changing diplomatic focus from ideological towards pragmatic goals in the context of that time. In particular, you can recognize a change in Korean diplomatic position during this period. Ideological confrontation has lessened since the mid-1960s, and the era of detente has arrived in the early 1970s. Against this backdrop, the Korean government declared the Year of Independent Diplomacy in 1969 and attempted to strengthen diplomatic relationship with non-aligned countries. The Declaration of Peace and Unification Diplomacy in June 23rd, 1973 has demonstrated the new diplomacy route in the era of detente, moving from ideological to pragmatic focus. In a competition with North Korea to secure a diplomatic relationship around the globe, the Korean government attempted to strengthen friendly relationship with more countries in the name of national security. In this regard, the government created relevant departments under the Ministry of International Relations, that is, Department of Africa and Arab Region in 1975, and divisions of Central America and of South America under the Department of Americas in 1978. It also promoted to gain economic interest via the expansion of diplomatic relationship. Around the 1970s, Korea entered into the stage of economic modernization and tried to diversify exporting destinations. In this regard, the first trade relationship started in 1970 when Korea imported coffee from Colombia and exported textile products to the country in 1972. Bilateral relationship has expanded in various aspects in 1980s, politics, economics, and culture, etc. Bilateral exchange has increased since, while this does not mean that the qualitative betterment of bilateral cooperation. Two countries still focus its diplomatic relationship with neighboring countries. A turning point for the bilateral relationship was in the 1990s. With the end of Cold War and the globalization, the Korean government has expanded its diplomatic focus from its neighboring four countries, the United Nations, Russia, China, and Japan, to other countries. Its interest for the Latin American region has increased since the presidential visit to Mexico in 1991 and visit to Latin American countries in 1996. For example, After these visits, the government created the Department of Latin America under the Ministry of International Relations. While Korea started to recognize the importance of the Latin American region, Colombia could not take advantage of the opportunity due to increasing insecurity problems produced by internal war as well as cartel-related crises. Now let's have a look at the fourth period since mid-2000s. Since the mid-2000s, bilateral relationship has unprecedentedly improved. On the Colombian side, there are several reasons. The official end of civil war. You can think of the official end of civil war and better security situations. Due to a better security situation and favorable government policies towards foreign investors, Colombia has received intense foreign direct investment from around the globe. Particularly in terms of the relationship with Korea, the ex-government of Manuel Santos has emphasized the importance of Asia by recognizing Korean experiences of economic growth and democratization. Also, you can think of free trade agreements. While Korea signed a free trade agreement with some of Latin American countries, such as Chile in 2004 and Peru in 2011. When it comes to Colombia, two countries agreed for the necessity of bilateral free trade agreements at the 2008 APEC summit and started the first negotiation in December 2009. And the free trade agreements between Korea and Colombia took effect in 2016, making a turning point for the bilateral relationship. Two countries promoted virtually cooperative relationship then after. In addition, you can also think of the Korea official development assistance towards Latin America. Over the past 6 decades, Korea has gained fame for its development experiences and thus started to take an important role in world politics and economy. In this regards, the country became a member of OECD Development Assistance Committee in November 2009, becoming a donor country from an aid beneficiary country. This change of position is unprecedented, and thus Korea has become an exemplar case for other developing countries. When it comes to the country's aid to Latin America, Korea gives a special attention to countries like Colombia, Peru, Bolivia, and Paraguay. The scale of aid to Colombia has been increased since the opening of Korea International Development Agency office in Bogota in 2009. Well, now let's summarize main determinants of bilateral relationship. In the mid-20th century, bilateral relationship was determined by US-led international order and support from both countries, Korea and Colombia. And between mid-1950s and mid-1970s, two countries highlighted the importance of national security and economic growth, making diplomatic relationship mainly with neighboring countries. Between mid-1970s and mid-2000s, Korea and Colombia promoted more direct bilateral relationship with a focus on pragmatic goals. And finally, since mid-2000s, there was a deepened bilateral relationship, particularly in terms of trade, investment, and international cooperation. Now, now as we live in an era of pandemic and climate change, bilateral relationship and cooperation needs to change its focus. considering sustainable development goals. For example, in May 2020, the President of Korea highlighted the importance of Green New Deal. And 2 months later, in July 2020, the government announced the Korean New Deal plan. The plan is a the plan is an attempt to change towards a systematically as a leading country and include a vision of Green New Deal and Digital New Deal, as well as strengthening social safety net. The global crisis such as pandemic and climate change make us to rethink the development route forward, not only talking about economic growth or modernization, and considering the climate change and the environment as well. In this regard, bilateral relationship between Korea and Colombia needs to take a more sustainable route. Well, cooperations in the field of green smart city or renewable energy could be an exemplar. Well, this is my presentation on changing importance of bilateral relationship between Korea and Colombia. Pues esto es mi presentación sobre el cambio de la importancia de la relación bilateral entre Corea y Colombia. Muchas gracias por su atención. Si tienen preguntas, por favor me las hagan. Espero que pueda participar yo pueda participar en otra oportunidad yendo y estando en Colombia después de toda esta pandemia. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, profesora Jin Su. Creo que esto complementa bien la temática que veníamos tratando a lo largo de la noche. Y pues estamos abiertos en este momento de pronto a alguna interacción. No sé si Mario todavía nos acompaña. Quisiera... ¿sí?
Carlos, muchas gracias. We want to thank Professor Hyun Seo from Puyong University in Busan. This is the current vision that is given of the diplomatic and cooperation positions of Colombia and Korea that we believe is very valuable. Do you think that the cooperation with Korea is low? Because more solid Colombian foreign policy is needed? ¿Consideras que hay necesidad de mejorar la política exterior colombiana? ¿Es muy inestable o cómo lo ven desde ahí?
¿Respondo ahora?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Es muy difícil hablar sobre las políticas exteriores de Colombia porque, bueno, pero como viendo cambio de relaciones exteriores entre dos países, bueno, estamos comparando con otros países en América Latina y estamos estableciendo muy bien la relación bilateral. Y bueno, para que sea más estable la relación bilateral, bueno, puede ser una manera que no cambie, pues como teniendo un plan estable para las relaciones bilaterales y para que no cambie dependiendo del cambio de gobiernos.
Bueno, muy bien. Profesor Carlos, no sé si tengas alguna pregunta. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos hasta esta hora. Es muy tarde ya en Colombia, pero aquí estamos atendiendo esta conferencia que es importante para la Asociación de Estudios Coreanos. Profesor Carlos.
Sí. Creo que es bien importante los puntos que ha señalado y creo que tiene bien estudiado cómo ha sido la evolución, digamos, del sistema y lo que ha regido un poquito las relaciones nuestras. Es cierto que, digamos que de alguna manera la relación Colombia-Corea ha estado basada fuertemente en este incidente que tuvimos de apoyo muy fuerte en el momento en que Corea lo necesitaba y luego Corea tomó la delantera, hizo un gran desarrollo y ahora pues es novena economía mundial y demás. Pero pienso que es un momento de ya establecer relaciones más allá de esta tradicional relación de los momentos en que se requirió para entrar a tener probablemente unas relaciones más profundas, económicas y de amistad, digamos, entre estas dos naciones. ¿Qué par de elementos propondría principalmente para que pasáramos un poco de esa relación tradicional a una relación más fructífera en estas líneas?
Bueno, muchas gracias por la pregunta y bueno, pienso que para que una relación más productiva, o sea, constructiva, creo que no solamente enfocando en los intereses económicos, o sea, como intereses de multinacionales o compañías, pero enfocando de institucionalización de dos países para que, ¿no? Por ejemplo, para proteger en cuanto a la invertir en como recursos naturales en Colombia, por ejemplo, y puede recibir recibir tal vez apoyo financiero del gobierno coreano, pero a la vez también respetando las reglas legales para proteger como, por ejemplo, pueblos indígenas o de naturaleza, ¿no? Entonces, que para que sea eso, y hay que haber reglas estrictas, ¿no? No solamente, estamos viviendo en una era muy de crisis, entonces tenemos que tener este aspecto, en cambio, en cuanto al desarrollo sostenible.
Muy bien, profesora, muchas gracias. Yo quería preguntarte, por último, ¿cuál es el papel que desempeña este Instituto de Estudios Latinoamericanos en tu universidad? ¿A qué se dedican? Y si es posible que mantengamos una cooperación más estrecha con la Asociación de Estudios Coreanos para todas las universidades de Colombia que te están escuchando.
Sí, pues esta es una asociación de latinoamericanista dentro de Corea del Sur, y tenemos muchos académicos, no solamente relaciones exteriores, pero estamos investigando mucho sobre los casos en cuanto a la política, económica, sociología, geografía, entre muchos, pues. Entonces, bueno, que sería muy bueno para nosotros también tengamos una relación estrecha, ¿no? Entre académicos o entre sociedad civil o gobierno, o sea, bienvenidos.
Muy bien, profesora, te tomaremos la palabra y haremos lo posible por contactarnos con ustedes para que vengas y nos visites, para que revises, digamos, muchas de las agendas de los grupos de investigación y de trabajo en nuestras universidades, que son regionales, son distintas, multiculturales. Entonces, pues esto va a servir para enriquecer los trabajos también de los centros de estudios y enriquecer la cooperación finalmente. Muchas gracias, profesora, y a la Universidad de VII University, muchas gracias también por haberse hecho presente en este trabajo. Nosotros, como Universidad Libre, ofrecemos, por supuesto, a la asociación este esfuerzo de convenio. Nosotros tuvimos una misión al Asia en el año 2016, en la que se firmaron más de 9 convenios de cooperación con Corea. Pero quizá Puyón se ha enfocado muchísimo en los trabajos de los grupos de investigación de ingenierías y temas marítimos que creemos es un gran trabajo de la Universidad de Puyón y del profesor Yeon, que es el que ha estado liderando este esfuerzo. Entonces, creemos que vamos a profundizar ese tema con las universidades regionales, con las universidades que pertenecen a la asociación, si ellas pues así lo quieren, ¿no? Bien, pues muchas gracias y entonces finalizamos. Muchas gracias a los asistentes por habernos acompañado en este 7º encuentro de estudios coreanos. Quiero cerrar, esta es la última conferencia de 21 conferencias a las que han asistido más de 928 personas en Colombia. Y creemos que ha sido muy importante, ha sido exhausto el ejercicio, porque hemos tenido un tema presencial, virtual, en el que hemos tenido que tomar aviones, como en el caso de Carlos, asistir a las reuniones de los actos de la asociación, buscar la manera para trabajar estos temas. Y para nosotros ha sido muy importante el esfuerzo y el trabajo que se ha hecho con la asociación. Creemos que la cooperación con Corea es indispensable. Tenemos una admiración especial por el desarrollo de Corea, por el trabajo de las universidades tan rigurosas. En la última misión visité más de 10 universidades en Corea del Sur y me sorprendió gratamente su hospitalidad, cómo nos recibieron, la manera en que están haciendo esfuerzos de innovación con las grandes compañías. Y creo que para las universidades nuestras solo nos queda aprender y transformar muchas de las cosas para efectos de responder a esos desafíos éticos que tienen que ver con los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible y con los procesos exitosos de la cooperación. Así que muchas gracias, querido Carlos, muchas gracias por la participación en esta clausura de este 7º encuentro de estudios coreanos. Al profesor Jun-Sae Jeon, que lo veo conectado todavía, mil gracias. A la Universidad de Dankook también University por haber trabajado este tema tan bonito, esta presentación tan importante. Y a todos los que han hecho posible, muchas gracias por el 7º encuentro de estudios coreanos.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much, everybody.
Muchas gracias. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Gracias.
See you again.
Gracias, hasta luego.